Donald Trump now files a removal action to take his case from Colorado up into the District of Colorado, from the state level up to the federal level, to stop the attempt to remove him from the 2024 ballot. We already know that a group of people filed a civil action in Colorado to keep Trump precluded from showing up on the primary ballots and from showing up on the presidential ballot in 2024. And Trump is saying, we're not going to be playing with this in state court. It's a federal issue. Let's talk about it in federal court. We're going to read through the filing. It's not too long, but this is important because this is the first sign of a strategy from Trump's defense. We know that this is going to be, as Jocelyn Benson calls it, she's the Secretary of State in Michigan, a persistent issue. They want this to be an issue, whether Trump is removed or not. They want him to have to fight it. They want to litigate it. It's going to be more lawfare. He's already bogged down with 4 indictments, tons of civil litigations from E. Jean Carroll and other people. And now this is just another attack vector to get him bogged down with having to even keep his name on the ballot. And in my opinion, at some point, some Secretary of State is going to do something like this. They will remove him, or they're going to make it very difficult for him to get on, and it will turn into a domino effect that we're going to have to battle, because the same people who tell us that they believe in democracy are the same people that want to keep ballots free from their political opponents. So let's take a look at the actual filing from Trump before we hear from 2 Secretaries of State who I think are going to be behind a lot of this. We already read through the entire lawsuit brought by these people: Norma Anderson, Priola, Claudine, Christopher, Kathy, and Krista, all filed in the Colorado State Court. But now Trump has submitted a notice of removal. And this is coming from Trump's team. And the other person who's a co-defendant in this is the Colorado Secretary of State. So here's what Trump says. And I think that this might be the same pattern we see in other lawsuits. When Trump gets sued, again, this is going to be popping up all over the country. What's the strategy? Do you battle them in state courts, or do you just start removing them all to federal courts and get some uniformity there, rather than dealing with Colorado and Arizona and Georgia and Michigan and Minnesota, which we'll see? Remove them all up to the federal level so that there is more precedent across the board. You get a ruling in Arizona or a ruling in Nevada, and you can say, hey, Nevada's doing this, Georgia, and say this is persuasive precedent that you should rely on, rather than relying on a bunch of disassembled state precedent. So Trump is removing it now. This is the first sign of what they're doing. He says this case arises under the 14th Amendment. That's why they want to take him off. Although plaintiffs here in Colorado have drafted their verified petition in a manner that ostensibly relies on state claims, which is that they did. In fact, every state claim, indeed every effort to bar Trump from running for president, relies solely on the application of the United States Constitution, 14th Amendment, Section 3. They want this to stay in state courts. But Trump is saying, yeah, but you're relying on the 14th Amendment, which is the federal Constitution, which is federal. They say that here, the plaintiffs, the people trying to remove Trump, they filed a 104-page petition, and we read through a lot of that. And they want an expedited hearing within 5 days. And so now Trump immediately filed this notice of removal to take this to federal court. They say, Your Honor, this court has federal question jurisdiction, and therefore removal is appropriate. They say the basis for removal, obviously, it's a federal question. It's the 14th Amendment, Section 3. Now, they've tried to create their claims, and what's so interesting about this new attack vector is that they're just making this up, and I mean that. Ludwig and Tribe and these so-called law professors, they just came up with this new theory, like this couple months ago, that this is now a self-executing feature of the Constitution, which nobody knew about until they just made it up. So now we're watching as they're adjusting their arguments. Okay, we already read the first draft of this by Florida Man. That was dismissed immediately by the judge. He just said, you're dismissed. Trump didn't even have time to respond to that one. But this one is the second draft. This one's a little bit more serious. Trump is now responding to this. The third draft's going to be better, and the fourth draft's going to be much better. So Trump says, in this case, they're trying to fashion their claims for relief based on state law. They're citing Colorado statute. They're not trying to bring this into the federal level. Trump's saying that's not what we're going to allow to happen. Now, their effort to ground their petition in state law cannot be an attempt to conceal the federal constitutional issue that we're talking about here. If you review it, you'll see that their entire complaint is based in the 14th Amendment. Specifically, it says, it's the intent of the people from Colorado to conform to the requirements of federal law. They said it. They said it in their complaint. Section 3 of the 14th Amendment is the U.S. Constitution. They cited it right there and there. They've also cited it. They said both the Secretary and this court are required required to support the Constitution, which is the 14th Amendment, again, citing the federal law. They're citing it here, they're citing it here, they're citing it here. So in other words, they're saying, Your Honor, they recognize that this is a federal question. They continue. In their second count, the ballot removal people, they say that their allegation states that because Trump is disqualified to serve as president under the 14th Amendment, they get declaratory relief. In total, they say the people suing, Your Honor, refer to the 14th Amendment 41 times in their petition. That's why this is a federal question, is because they keep talking about it. Courts recognize that under the artful pleading doctrine, that we must show that the claims are based on questions of federal law. Here, Your Honor, we've done that. They are talking about the 14th Amendment. They're relying on federal law, and therefore that satisfies our request for removal. They filed their action on September 6. Donald Trump has still not been served a copy of the petition. The Denver District Court docket does not contain a return of service either for the Secretary of State. Nobody's been served yet. And so our removal request is timely. We filed it under the law within 30 days of receipt. We've attached all of the dockets that we need. All of the information that we need has all been attached here. And after removal, we're going to serve everybody with a notice of this removal. And so pretty simple. By filing this notice of removal, Trump's not waiving anything. And for those reasons, we now remove it. So we'll be seeing what the court does in federal court. Signed by Scott Gessler, Jeffrey Blue, and Justin North, all representing Donald Trump. And this is, I think, is a good strategy. It's to not let this be death by 1,000 cuts with various different lawsuits in all the various states. Just pull them all up to the federal level and consolidate your defenses. I think just in terms of resources, that's going to be a much better strategy as well, because other judges at the federal level will look to what other judges do at the federal level. I think it's going to be more persuasive that way. Now, this is interesting because Trump also has another parallel removal possibility, which is the Georgia case. This is a 2024 ballot removal argument, but he also has the federal immunity claims in the Georgia prosecution. Mark Meadows, we're still waiting for removal on that one. And so this is about the 2024 election, and they are removing this one. But this is going to be, I think, a strategy that they're going to have to employ many times over. We're probably going to see this again repeatedly throughout the 2024 election, because we've got two different secretaries of state here who are both talking about this as though it is an issue. If they're talking about it like it's not resolved, that means this is 100% a part of their plan. The fact that they're talking about it, in my opinion, means they're going to do it. So this is Jake Tapper bringing these people on, warming up this concept, getting their base acclimated to it, A/B testing it with the American public, and constantly testing to see how they can keep Trump off the ballots.
A new lawsuit filed in Colorado is trying to keep Donald Trump's name off the ballot. This lawsuit claims that under the 14th Amendment, anyone who has taken an oath to uphold the Constitution is barred from holding future office if they engage in insurrection or aid insurrectionists. This is an argument that has been made by some legal scholars, and now a growing number of organizations are calling on secretaries of state to disqualify the former president because of his efforts to overturn the 2020 election. Efforts, I should note, he has not been convicted in any court of having done anything illegal for, at least not as of this broadcast. I'm joined right now by two secretaries of state, Steve Simon of Minnesota and Jocelyn Benson of Michigan. Both are Democrats. Secretary Benson, let me start with you. Is this something that the state of Michigan is looking into? I'm going to go to Secretary Simon first. Secretary Simon, is this something that your state, the state of Minnesota, is looking into at all?
Well, in terms of our office, the Office of Secretary of State, we've been very clear. This is not our call. We are not the eligibility police, whether it's a constitutional argument or a residency argument or an age argument. That in Minnesota is left to the courts. We have a tool, we have a vehicle in law for people to make these kinds of challenges. So if what you're asking is whether I or our office, we are considering unilaterally acting, we are not, and we will not. Our presumption is if someone files for office in Minnesota, they are entitled to a spot on the ballot unless and until a court tells us otherwise.
So that
there you go, right? That's going to be the key. No, we're not going to do anything about it. It's not my decision. I'm not going to unilaterally take somebody off, but some judge somewhere said something sometime, and that's because.
That certainly makes sense. You need a legal precedent, I would say. What about the politics of it? David Frum, who is a political pundit of sorts and writer, he wrote on Twitter, quote, "Suppose secretaries of state in one or more swing states succeeded in keeping Trump off the ballot. Then suppose President Biden wins re-election by winning the electoral votes of states that debarred Trump. What does this country look like afterward? Chaos," unquote. I mean, he's looking at the idea that
obviously
this would be an unprecedented move, and politically it would be very problematic. You are in a swing state. How do you think that politically this would play out?
They don't care.
Well, I think it's safe to say there's risk. He's enunciated some of that risk. Arguably, there's risk the other way as well. That's why I think this should be the province, and is in most states, I gather, the province of the courts and not elected officials like me or others. They should decide it based on the facts and based on the law and without regard necessarily to political considerations. I assume that's what's going to happen here. I assume that this one way or another will find its way to the U.S. Supreme Court, whether by way of Colorado or any other state where there might be a pending lawsuit.
The U.S. Supreme Court on planet Earth would never, not this court and not on this planet, would never keep Donald Trump's name off a ballot in any state. I can't envision that ever happening, just practically speaking. Do you?
I think that they might just defer to the states. It's the states' rights. The states can govern their elections however they want to. They're not going to say Trump can be on it or off of it. I still think that's a long shot. I think that they would not allow that to happen. I mean, truthfully, but I can see that happening. I mean, there's, by the way, there's precedent for this because the same thing happened in 2020. We said, hey, there's all sorts of election problems here all across the country. And this was after the fact, but the Supreme Court said, well, we're not going to get involved in those things because it is up to the states. So it's the hands-off approach to this. And look, I know that sounds insane. Okay, I get it. Even Jake Tapper asking this question, like, there's no way a Supreme Court would allow this to happen, right? No way. And I sit here go, oh gosh, you're right, Jake. There's no way. There's no way. That's crazy. But then I think about, well, we all said that about a lot of different things in this country many times before. I thought it was crazy that we would ever be locked down, honestly. I was sitting here saying, are we going through this right now? I was talking to my people at my office. Are we serious? What? In America? Locked down? What? I couldn't believe it. And it was, that was one ordeal and we all went through it. We all woke up the next day going, here we are. And same thing. Now, indicting a former president 4 times. I had an ugly feeling in my gut it was going to happen, but it was this thing. Are you sure? Are you really sure this is going to actually happen? Could this actually happen in America? Boom, we wake up 4 different indictments of a former president. People talking about putting him in jail and a trial happening in months with 12.5 million pages of documents. Like, all of these things are insane. Insane. I know. The idea that Trump wouldn't be on a ballot in 2024 is insane. I know. But so was everything else. And here we are.
Look, it's hard to say in this sense. I mean, you're right. It seems on its surface unlikely, but I have learned a long time ago guessing what courts are going to do is problematic. I mean, this is a legal theory that's been embraced by people on both sides of the political spectrum, conservatives as well as progressives. So I don't know. There's no telling, and who knows what way it arrives at the court through what case based on what findings by a court below. I just don't know.
Yep.
Secretary Benson, welcome back. We're having some technical issues
Thanks.
with you. Is this idea of keeping Donald Trump's name off of the ballot in the state of Michigan because of the 14th Amendment, is this something that you are seriously considering?
Well, I think it's a compelling legal question. And
Compelling.
there is an existing lawsuit in our state that was
Very
filed
compelling.
several weeks ago.
Yes.
And now we see other cases popping up around the country that will ultimately ensure the proper place for this determination is made in the courts, which it should be. So it's something we're seriously looking at. And I've been talking with colleagues in other states as well about this as we proceed to create a process
Yep.
that ensures any precedent here does also not allow this to be misused in the future by officials who might want to block candidates from the ballot simply because they disagree with them politically.
Did you hear what she just said? We're going to remove Trump from the ballot, but make sure that this can't be used again in the future to just remove people off politically. They're going to do it. Look at her face. She's going to do it. They're thrilled about this. Somebody's going to do it. They've already got judges lined up, no doubt.
Ultimately, the U.S. Supreme Court on a national issue like this is going to be the final arbiter. I expect that decision will come sooner rather than later, but we should also expect this as a question, as an issue to really be a cloud throughout the entire election cycle.
A cloud.
Your counterpart, Secretary Benson, in Georgia.
She's right about that. It is going to be a cloud. It's going to be a ton of litigation, tons of money. They just need one judge to do it. They don't need a lot of states to do it, and they can have a split. It's fine. If they win and they seize power again, who cares about the political ramifications? It's like they're concerned about the political consequences of it. They think that they've got the country on lockdown. They're, rounding up anybody who opposes them. They've got, journalists who are out there speaking freely, being prosecuted. We've got Owen Schroyer, right? He's got 4-month request from the DOJ. These people are psychopaths. got a bloodlust that is just infused in their entire existence. And they're going to do whatever they can to just stop Trump. So if they can keep him off the ballot, but win, that's the end game. There is no other real consideration there, because if Trump wins, they're done, right? There is no alternative for them. And they think that this man is Hitler, and the movement behind it is full of, white supremacist MAGA Republicans or whatever they say. So they really are out of options at this point. And as we saw, Joe Biden's numbers continue to jump in the toilet. Jocelyn says it's a persistent cloud. Of course it is. It's part of their tactic.
Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger wrote an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal about this. It's titled, "I Can't Keep Trump Off the Ballot." And in it, he writes, "For a Secretary of State to remove a candidate would only reinforce the grievances of those who see the system as rigged and corrupt." Doesn't he have a point?
Yeah, there's a lot of real concerns there. And frankly, one of the biggest things that is impressing upon me in this moment isn't simply this question of, are state election officials really the proper deciders in this as unilateral decision makers? I don't think so. I think the courts are.
Yeah, the courts
but
are.
secondly, our job as state election officials is to ensure people can trust the system, people have faith in their vote and our democracy. And though I will follow the law and uphold the Constitution, whatever that may be, as first and foremost, a North Star for me is ensuring our democracy is one that gives people choices, that respects voters and political parties opportunity to elect their preferred candidates. So all of that is tied up in this as well. And it's why we as state election officials really aren't the proper arbiters of this decision. It really is the courts. And that's ultimately how this is going to play out.
All right, Secretaries of State, Steve Simon.
Okay, that's the new talking point. They're just going to defer to the courts. Whatever the courts want to do, they're going to do it. And they're not going to be people who are making the decisions unilaterally. It's going to be some judge somewhere, like some Chutkin somewhere or some Kaplan somewhere, who just is insanely deluded, thinking that Trump really is an insurrectionist. And how many times have we seen this? We've seen this from other judges in sentencings. Proud Boys Enrique Tarrio is getting, 22 years because of the insurrection and blah, blah, blah. So how is it possible that Trump is on the ballots if they think that? Okay, and especially, my friends, we are not even close to the finish line on this yet. They are going to convict him before those arguments are made. So they're going to try to get that trial done in DC before the election. That conviction will be used as a pretext. Right now, they're just seeding the ground, okay? They're just planting the seeds. Yeah, removal. We'll defer to the courts. They're going to wait for a felony conviction. Jack Smith may still hit him with an insurrection charge or a sedition charge just to really put the icing on the cake here. Depends how bad their side is doing. Then, at that moment, some judge somewhere will say, insurrectionist or felon, convicted. And that will be the first domino. And these people are just plotting. They're sitting here, no, we want to empower everybody. But they're going to change this game again. They're going to come back out and say, so this never happens again. And Trump is not a real candidate anyways. He's an insurrectionist. And so in order to prevent this from happening, we have to do this, but we'll never do it again.